How's it going, y'all? It's your boy Raymond back up in here with another film review, and today we're going to be diving into yet another new film that came out recently. I had the honor and privilege, I guess, to go see the film Megalopolis, which is Francis Ford Coppola's new film. I had the pleasure of seeing that early at an AMC with a Q&A with not only Francis Ford Coppola, but also with De Niro and Spike Lee there as well as panelists. And we'll dive into that in a little bit. So, we're going to be talking about the film. I'm going to be kind of going over my thoughts and opinions on it and just overall what I thought about the experience of the film, because it is definitely a little bit more of an unusual film going experience with like some little added effects here or there. I want to first start off by addressing the Q&A, because unlike most film premieres that I tend to go to in LA, the Q&A happened before the film because it was being live streamed from New York, where the actual premiere was going on over at the New York Film Festival, or I think it was being hosted by the New York Film Festival. I'm not quite sure. The Q&A happened with Robert De Niro and Spike Lee there as panelists. Neither of them are really involved in the film in any way, so I'm not quite sure like why they were there. I think they were just there to be there as special guests, which is cool. But it was very awkward and interesting, I guess, to say the least. Essentially, Coppola throughout the Q&A discusses these themes and topics that he put into the idea of Megalopolis, and how this has been like a 20 plus year sort of passion project thing that I guess you could say that he's been working on for a really long time, and it has definitely evolved over the years. He sort of goes over how the concept of this film is sort of dealing with the fall of the Roman Empire, but then trying to put that in a futuristic, like modern day context, I guess you could say. Essentially interweaving that with this futuristic utopian perspective. You can tell that he was very passionate about this, and obviously going through the process of trying to get the film made over 20 plus years, he clearly wanted to do it for a very long time, and it was near and dear to him. And you can definitely see that in the final product itself. However, as Coppola sort of dives into more of the politically charged ideals and themes that he put into the film itself, panelists De Niro and Spike Lee were asked to join in and give their sort of comments about the film because they had both seen it prior. And of course, De Niro being De Niro went on this sort of Trump bash / rant, I guess, for a little bit of it. Essentially just throwing out things about Trump and talking about going to vote, make sure everybody goes to vote. He essentially made the film out to seem like this politically charged film that dealt with the idea of what's going on right now in America. But with the things that Coppola was establishing in the Q&A and his responses to the questions, it doesn't really seem like that's the perspective that Coppola had on it. But of course, De Niro being De Niro, he translated it through his view and through his own lens as this political film about, I guess, like the idea of an empire or an emperor like coming in and possibly taking over, I guess. That's how he saw it, and that's what he took away from it, I guess. You could tell that Coppola was pretty visually uncomfortable with a lot of the things that De Niro was saying. I felt kind of bad for him because I think Coppola definitely had a specific vision on like the politics of what the film meant to him. And I think he wanted to have a little bit more of like a nuanced conversation that hadn't really been had before about certain topics that he was throwing into the film, like the idea of like the corruption of state, reform stuff and whatnot. But unfortunately, like De Niro and then Spike Lee sort of adding on to that really made it more kind of about the election and the idea of going against Trump. It was definitely an awkward experience just right off the bat before the film even began with the Q&A alone. At least in my theater specifically, everybody you could tell was like a little bit like awkward, and I don't think people really were appreciative of a lot of the things that were mainly being discussed. And obviously you could tell that Coppola did not appreciate what De Niro and a bit of what Spike Lee were saying about certain things that dealt with his film. It was about 30 minutes, and then we just got launched straight into the film. And unfortunately, in the film itself, rather than being sort of this more nuanced conversation and political angled film, what Coppola essentially envisioned as like this utopian society with like this political commentary really just kind of ended up being his vision of his own views and ideals that he just regurgitated on screen in this format with this large budget that he was able to accumulate. It comes off more as just like a pure like reflection of his own thoughts and feelings about certain things, and like this deep like love letter to like the Roman Empire and that point in history and how much of a nerd he is about like that era. And it just kind of is like a parade of his ideals and ideologies about that time, and sort of mixing that with what's going on, I guess, today. He also is diving into this idea of genius and how one person's influence over a society could be dangerous, but it should be treated in a sense that could also be extremely useful and should be admired, and that person should feel accomplished, essentially. So recently I did see the re-release, or I guess reprise, of Coppola's film One from the Heart. That film specifically is definitely showing a certain side of Coppola that I sort of saw coming, but at the same time with the execution of it was a little interesting. I think that film specifically is very bold and really trying to make a statement as to the style and as to the production design and just how films are made in general. However, it sort of lacks a lot of like the key touchstones of what Coppola is able to do when he's at his best, which is using those tools and using what he's given and translating that in through his stories. Apocalypse Now, for instance, like his back was up against the wall the entire time of that shoot. They went over budget. It was a hellhole of a shooting process to get that film made. And yet I think it's one of the greatest films ever made. It's just an incredible body of work seeing all of that be put together. But obviously, you know, as many people know, that film almost killed him, and it almost killed Martin Sheen, and that film was pure hell to make. And it seems like when Coppola is really sort of at his freest, when he has all of this range of whether it be money or tools or whatever to sort of do whatever he wants, it tends to lean one way or the other, where it becomes more self-indulgent for lack of, I guess, story and lack of nuance and character dynamics in exchange for flashy production design and a flashy and impressive exterior. And Megalopolis, unfortunately, seems to be sort of in that similar range where it has the issues of its story and its script, but with the flashy exterior. Hired like a bunch of people that he knew. He hired his son, Roman Coppola, to do like a bunch of the visual effects and whatnot. So it seemed very much like a pure passion project, which is fine. However, in this case, it seems a little too self-indulgent, and even more so in this film than in One from the Heart. Purely what the society or what the film is really about is this city of New Rome, and that's literally what it's called. We dive into the film with some narration from Lawrence Fishburne, but also with these weird like title cards that appear throughout the film, having all of this text, but the text is also narrated by Lawrence Fishburne. So it feels like why would you need like Lawrence Fishburne to narrate it if you have the text cards? I would much rather just listen to Lawrence Fishburne. But at the same time, like the narration is so frequent throughout the film that it's distracting from what's actually going on. And the other thing too is that like the narration throughout the film isn't consistent with what's going on in the film. At some points, it seems like Lawrence Fishburne is talking to himself in like the scene, but we're hearing it as narration, and then he'll just interrupt himself, or like the narration will just cut out when something's happening in the scene. So it's just super inconsistent and feels kind of redundant when given all of this information in these title cards, and even visually when, you know, you could just express it that way. Like, we don't need to have it spoon-fed all of the time, so I don't know why he's doing that. But anyway, so we dive in, and then Adam Driver is there. Adam Driver plays this genius inventor rich guy named Caesar. He had just won a Nobel Prize for this like crazy material that he made that's like supposed to change the world, I guess. We're essentially hearing from like Caesar himself that this material could be like world changing, and he wants to build this utopia out of New Rome because it's currently the city's like being run into the ground, and there's like homeless people and poor people and riots, and everybody hates the Mayor Cicero, who is played by Giancarlo Esposito. He essentially shows up, and they're in like one of the first scenes, they have like this weird like back and forth conversation thing while I guess they're overlooking the plans that Caesar has for like a futuristic utopian New Rome with this material that he's made and designed himself. Essentially, the messaging is very heavy-handed, and it gets stale like pretty quick because it's shoved down your throat for most of the film too, and then that mixed with the narration is just annoying after a while. So Mayor Cicero, he's essentially supposed to be like this corrupt city mayor, I guess. And, you know, he clashes with Caesar throughout the film because he wants to do things and he wants to run the city through government and through laws, and, you know, the traditional, I guess, like corrupt nature of the state is essentially what is trying to be portrayed. But Caesar is like this billionaire guy who wants to change things because he has this great invention that he believes will change the world and turn everything into like this utopian society. And if a lot of these ideas sound familiar, it's because they kind of are, but it's weird seeing Coppola talking about these kinds of things in this way when it's so indulgent and it's so like on the nose. There's just a lot of things that I don't think necessarily needed to be so thrown at you. Like, you could obviously figure some of this stuff out on your own and pay attention more to the story aspects and what the characters are doing and like why the characters are doing anything at all, and really focusing in on that instead of really this overarching grand thematic idea of like this utopia and the idea of genius and how society treats geniuses or people who are skilled or inventors or artists or whatever. You know, it's Coppola and he's getting older now, so I'm sure he wants to have his final hurrah or whatever when it comes to a lot of these things. So he's just throwing it all in your face and you're just breathing it all in. Oh yeah, and also Caesar can stop time for some reason. I'm not particularly sure why, but he just can. It's just like a thing that is introduced at the very start of the film, but I don't know why he can. It's not ever explained, so I have no idea why. And then later on, Julia can stop time for some reason, but we'll get to her in just a second. So the mayor's daughter, Julia, played by Natalie Emanuel, essentially complicates things because Mayor Cicero is, you know, going back and forth against Caesar, and they're both having like these confrontations because they both want to run the city a certain way. But then Cicero's daughter, Julia, essentially steps in and then gets the hots for Caesar for some reason. But at the beginning of the film, Caesar has like this relationship, I guess, with Aubrey Plaza. But then in a scene early on when he's like, I guess, having sex with Aubrey Plaza's character, there's a flashback of Caesar's wife dying, who like drowned. So he had a wife previously that I guess is the cause for the material that he invents from her death. So people think that he killed her, but now he's sleeping with other women. It's so all over the place. Like, I don't like, just flesh something out. Like, I don't know why this has to be so complicated. So anyways, Julia gets the hot for Caesar. They date for a bit to Cicero's discouragement. So he's like pissed that they're together, but she's like enthralled with Caesar for some reason. I don't know why. I guess because he's like a genius, and that's like enough reason for her to be attracted to him. Aubrey Plaza throughout, she essentially plays like this upper class whore, I guess you could say, for lack of a better word. She's with Caesar at the beginning, and they have like this weird sex scene at the beginning, but then she ends up marrying this rich billionaire mogul guy who's like 30 years older than she is, but then she still has like the hots for Caesar throughout the film. And then she has this weird sex scene with like Shia LaBeouf that's like extremely weird and manipulative. Oh yeah, by the way, Shia LaBeouf's in this as well. So Aubrey Plaza, she seems like she's having a fun ass time doing Aubrey Plaza things, being very sexual and manipulative, just doing Aubrey Plaza things. Overall, I would say the performances are decent, but none really stand out to me other than Aubrey Plaza, just because she is having like a good time with her character and is actually trying to, you know, play around with stuff. But none of these characters ever really feel like actual characters. They just feel like caricatures, and like they're just tools that Coppola is using to drive the plot and the themes forward, especially Caesar, who Adam Driver is doing his best with the material that's being given, but his character is so one note, where he's just this genius that will stop at nothing to get his creation made and to build this utopia, and then just gets like a love interest because she's into him, I guess. There isn't really a whole lot for them to work with, especially Julia, who's just kind of there to push Caesar forward in the plot and push his character and encourage him so that he can, you know, fulfill his destiny or whatever. So the plot. What is the plot? So Caesar makes this material thing, right? So he makes the material, wins a Nobel Prize. People are starting to become convinced that he can change the city and build like a new utopia. But people are also concerned because he supposedly killed his wife, and that gave him like the idea for the material that he invented or something. So that's all this weird loose end. It's not quite explained why she dies. According to what Caesar literally says to Julia about his ex-wife, is that she like ran away and drove off of a bridge and drowned because of some sort of confrontation previously. I think it's supposed to be interpreted that she like was upset with his genius or something, and she just kills herself. I don't know. Like it's not explained that well at all. And then also Caesar with the time stopping ability, you would think that he would be the only one to have that, but then Julia, just by, I guess, being the love interest, can also use this ability too, but nobody else can do that for some reason. I don't know why it's a thing. It's a cool effect, sure, but like, why? All of the side characters honestly don't mean anything. They are just there for flash and to try and build out the world that Coppola created in New Rome, which sometimes is interesting, is mostly gimmicky. You know, there's some stuff that I guess is kind of interesting. That one like Christian girl who is supposed to be like this like caricature, I think, of like Taylor Swift or something. I thought that was hilarious. And she gets like this see-through dress that Caesar makes for her. And then it's like revealed that she slept with Caesar. And so everybody just immediately like turns against her, which I thought was hilarious. It's so on the nose. But I just thought it was entertaining that happened. Some of the effects are interesting. I think Roman did a cool job trying to flesh out the ideas that, you know, Coppola had. And so by the end of the film, all of this goes down. Everybody is rioting against Mayor Cicero, and everybody's starting to side with Caesar. And then by the end of the day, Caesar essentially convinces kind of Mayor Cicero to come around on things with the help of Julia. He just ends up building his utopia anyways and turns New Rome into like this new utopia, I guess. And everybody goes home happy, I guess. That's the entire film. Everything else is just for looks, and honestly, the characters are just there to be there and to just flesh out the world. None of them matter whatsoever. Aubrey Plaza like kind of matters, but it's the entire story is mainly just between Cicero, Caesar, and Julia. There's like other side characters, but honestly, they're so irrelevant that it doesn't even matter that they're in there. Lawrence Fishburne, who is doing the narration for some reason, is like Caesar's butler, but that's like his only role. He's like his butler slash bodyguard, like his right-hand man, but that's like it. And he does a lot of the narration for some reason. I don't know why. That's like his only role. The tone of the film is just all over the place. There's like these weird sexual tension scenes where characters are like having sex, but in weirdly like manipulative ways. Like anybody who has sex in this movie is just trying to get something out of the other, especially Aubrey Plaza. Yeah, sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's shocking, sometimes it's boring. Sometimes it's visually really interesting, but most of the time it's just a mess. And like I said, the visual effects, sometimes they're really good and sometimes they are really bad. Like the material that Caesar invents, I don't even remember what it's called, but the material that he invents, it has like this like CGI texture light effect thing on it. Once you get to the end, when he builds the utopia out of it, it looks so insanely fake and unbelievable. There's other times too, like Adam Driver has like this trip out scene that is shot, I guess, kind of in a cool way. There's some cool effects. There's some ideas that I like. I think some of the visual effects and the styling is interesting. The performances are decent. I think some of the direction can be good sometimes. But other than that, this thing is just a mess, and it's too self-indulgent, and it's too caught up in trying to say what it's trying to say, but in a way that is confusing and in a way that only Coppola wants to tell the story. So it's just all over the place, and the message really just gets lost until the very end when he tries to wrap a nice little bow around everything. It's really hard to care about the characters because there is just such a lack of character with a lot of these characters. Like, they're just not fleshed out. A lot of the interactions feel very one note, and like it's just trying to get to a point so that the story can continue. I don't know. I feel really bad saying this, but overall, it was just disappointing. Like I said, I love Coppola. I love him so much, but he definitely can stray a little bit too self-indulgent. Funny enough, like his best work is usually when he's like pressed up against a wall and he has to figure it out himself. And in this case, I think maybe he just had a little bit too much freedom with the money, with the creative freedom as well, to where I don't think there was anybody who was going to like stop him in his tracks with some of the decisions that he made. And you can definitely see that in the film. Can definitely say that it's 100% his vision, and he did the film his way, and this is what it is. For me, I just didn't really care for it. It's just too all over the place, too messy. For this film, I am giving it a 4 out of 10. And I don't think that's really going to change, to be honest. I don't know if I could necessarily recommend the film, but obviously if you're into film, if you know who Coppola is, if you're a fan of Coppola's work, I would recommend just going to see it so that you could see a modern day Coppola film, especially in theaters too, which would be a great experience. Those are my thoughts and opinions on it. If you felt a different way or if you felt similarly, go ahead and comment down below. I would love to hear what you guys think about the film. It's getting a lot of mixed reactions right now. So this will definitely be adding to that conversation. But go ahead and comment down your thoughts down below. And be sure to like and subscribe, of course, as well. Going to be coming out with some more stuff this week. And obviously, new Music Fridays coming up again. So going to be making some more music videos as well. So stay tuned for that. But otherwise, thank you guys for watching. I definitely appreciate it. And I'll see you guys in the next video.